question for you. What does Beyonce Knowles, Mary Magdalene, J.K. Rowling, Sarah Blakely, and Malala Yousafzai have in common? Well, first of all, maybe you guys don't know all of them, but you know one of them, right? All of these girls have something in common. Yup, and Mary Magdalene is in there. And today I want to tell you their stories, and hopefully it will inspire you preacher girls to do something great with your lives. I was thinking just earlier today that I could tell you any one story, but women are inspiring and have been inspiring since Eve, which was the first woman God ever made. Even she was a trailblazer. She had to do so many things that had never been done before, including birth children. But sometimes, as a mom or as a working woman, as a mom, working woman wife, as a mom, working woman wife, minister, creator, whatever it is, whatever capacity you're in, some days it's just tough and it feels like you're here on your own and you're doing all the things and you can't get everything done and you're overthinking everything. And today, I just want to tell you five short, cool, interesting stories about five women who changed the world or who changed their lives and really had insurmountable odds if you think about it. They just had the worst luck sometimes, and really nobody expected them to achieve anything, but yet great things happen around them. And so, some of you might be confused because you're like, well, these are not all Christian women or they're not all godly women. And that's not the point. The point of today's podcast is maybe you just need a little inspiration, and that's what these girls will do for you. So let's talk about the first girl, and she's one of my favorites, and her name is Sarah Blakely. Have you ever heard the name? You might not know the name, but I promise you, you know what she did. I'll tell you a little bit about Sarah. So Sarah was in her room one day and she was trying to get ready to go to a party. And so she picked out the pretty dress, and the dress is a dress she had seen in a magazine, and it's just a beautiful dress, and she knew that it was gonna look great because it looked good in the pictures. But when Sarah put the dress on, it didn't look right. It looked awful. And so, because sometimes we just don't look like the mannequins look, at least not most of us. So she reached for the girdle and the bra and all the things that she, was available to her, and then put the dress on and it looked worse. You ever tried those? Some of those things that you put on that squeeze in and tuck in and it's uncomfortable and it pinches and it just makes you look like a sausage and it doesn't make you look any better. Well, she tried and tried to find the right undergarments that would look great under this magnificent dress that didn't look great and couldn't find anything that worked. So you know what she did? She took a pair of tights and she cut the legs off of them and she put them on and they fit better. And Sarah Blakely invented Spanx. Yep, that's where Spanx was born. In Atlanta, Georgia, in her little apartment to a little broke girl. She invented the best undergarment because she needed it. And so Spanx not only became a worldwide phenomenon, she became the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. I think it was in 2015. And Spanx became a worldwide name. Everybody's got a pair. And it just happened because one little girl who needed an undergarment, a shaper, decided to make it happen. I think that's a really cool story. Her name is Sarah Blakely, and you would like it. Now, by the way, everybody's got undergarments. There's Skims and I don't even know them all, but there are a million different ones, Honey Loves and all the things, but she was first. And that's Sarah Blakely. So today, I don't know if you've got a need, maybe the next best thing is the result of you finding an answer to that need. And it could be as close as just cutting the feet off a pair of tights. That's Sarah Blakely. All right, let's talk about another girl. Maybe you know her. Sarah Blakely actually got her big break with her Spanx when she cut the legs off the pantyhose when Oprah featured a pair of Spanx on her Favorite Things show, and then it blew up, became a worldwide phenomenon. She became rich and famous, but not only was she the first self-made billionaire female, she has, in 2018, signed a a pact, and I can't remember the name of it. I think I wrote it down somewhere. The Giving Pledge. It says that she will give away more than half of her fortune to charity. Good girl altogether. And I hope that that inspires somebody today, that you don't have to have a phenomenal idea. It does not have to be about technology. It doesn't have to be the cure for cancer. It can be as easy as a pair of pantyhose. How about this one? Have you ever heard of Harry Potter? Well, Harry Potter is not just one of the best selling novel franchises ever, but there are theme parks, there are games, there are all kinds of rides, books, novels, all kinds of things based on J.K. Rowling, which is the lady who invented Harry Potter and the whole series. But J.K. Rowling didn't start off as a billionaire. Nope. She started off just as a poor girl, and I think she lived in Edinburgh. Yep, Edinburgh, Scotland. Yeah. And do you know that before anybody would publish the Harry Potter series, she was denied by publishers over and over and over and over again? Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, selling 500 million copies all over the world, and then every successive book that she wrote becoming popular and more popular until she had so much money because of her writing, didn't even know what to do with it. She's generous. She has a storytelling gift, but it didn't start that way. She faced opposition, and she faced time and time and time of being rejected and people saying her work was no good, it was amateur, people were saying her characters were undeveloped, that nobody would like the Harry Potter story. And yet here we are. This is not a plug for the Harry Potter series at all. In fact, I don't even know if you've read, and you don't know if I've read any of those books, but the story is still very inspiring. And that's for those of you girls out there who have been denied. You have a project, you have a book, you have an idea, and it's been turned down, and you're giving it up. You stuck it in a back corner somewhere. And really, maybe you just need to try again. You just need to keep trying until you find that one publisher, until you find that one buyer, until that one big box store takes your jams and jellies. You can't give up just because you've heard a no or 100 no's, because all you need is that one yes. That's the story of J.K. Rowling. The third girl I want to talk to you about is Malala. You probably have heard her first name, but you probably never heard Malala Yousafzai, right? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but she was born in 1997 in Pakistan. And Malala became an advocate for girls' education. And that's not a big deal. I mean, everybody believes in girls' education, right? Except some of the girls who don't think they need an education, but she was not one of those. She wanted an education, but at that time in Pakistan, the Taliban had banned girls from being educated. But this young lady was such an advocate for women's literacy that when she was 15 years old, the Taliban tried to assassinate her, and they shot her while she was on a school bus. She survived the assassination attempt, and she went on to write her very popular memoirs. The story, I'm Malala, the story of a girl who stood up for education and was shot by the Taliban. That was the name of the memoir. And it, of course, became an international global phenomenon and a worldwide bestseller. She not only is the youngest ever recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, which she got in 2014, she was 17 years old when she got that prize, and it was for children's education and activism. And she was just 15 when she survived an assassination attempt by one of the world's most threatening terrorist organizations. But she was less than 15 when she decided to stand up for a cause because she so believed in it. You know, in the United States of America, most young ladies, most old ladies, most ladies in their middle age won't stand up for any cause unless it only applies to them. But she was fighting for the cause of herself and all these young ladies who would be denied an education, and it almost cost her her life, but it didn't matter. And many years later, it still doesn't matter because she continues to speak out on behalf of girls and their education, and she delivers powerful speeches at the UN. And not only there, she has, in 2027, she started continuing her education at Oxford University, and she pursued a degree in philosophy, politics, and economics. And that is Malala. And I hope, if nothing else, she inspires some young ladies, some older ladies, some middle-aged girls, some mamas, some single moms, somebody who's struggling right now to fight for a cause that is bigger than you. Because it may cost you something, but it's so going to be worth it if you make something happen for somebody else. I hope that's what Preacher Girl means to you. Preacher Girl does not exist to make anyone famous, to make anyone rich, but it really exists to make sure that you know that God has called you for something bigger than you. And maybe you being shy or being quiet or being, all by yourself in your corner of the world seems like if you don't have a voice. But if a little girl in the middle of Pakistan, if she can have a voice in the world and make such a big difference, I know you can and I can as well. And we have an obligation. We get a chance to live in a world where in a minute, something can reach the other side of the world. And so that means you have a voice. Stand up for the underprivileged, stand up for the marginalized, stand up for people who need someone to support them. You might say, nobody wants to hear me, but I believe that if God wants people to hear you, you will be heard. So the next one is funny. Okay, maybe she's not funny to you, but it's a funny thing that I'm bringing her up here because I'm sure in a pastor's blog you wouldn't expect it. But let's talk about Beyonce, Queen Bee. So here's the background. So I used to live in Texas more than a decade ago, and somebody I knew said to me that they were in Night at the Apollo with Destiny's Child. So they had a group, and Destiny's Child was a new group where Beyonce was a teenager, and that their group came first and Destiny's Child came second. Now, I have not seen the footage. I can't prove any of that is true, but this person told me that that was the story, and this girl came second. So now, as I know who Beyonce is, and I'm thinking, wow, if she came second, how come you didn't come? Where is your superstar? Hooray. Anyway, but I think about that sometimes, but then I think about Beyonce, and she has, if you don't know who she is, you probably live under a rock because I don't know very many other um, musicians and artists that have as much of an impact on a generation as she has had. Okay, even those of you who are like, well, I don't know who she is, I bet you know all the single ladies, right? You know that. If you don't know that, I know there are other things that you know that she has done or she has said, or maybe you love her, maybe you hate love her, maybe you envy her. I don't know what it is, but she is not only a vocal artist that has won and broken more records, more Grammys than anyone else. Let me see if I can it says she went solo in 2003 and with the album Dangerously in Love, and people didn't like it because they didn't want the group to break up, but went on to such iconic success and with her videos and advocacy and all the things that she does, that she pushes boundaries in that have never even been heard of. I don't know. She's not my favorite artist at all, by not by a long shot, but you can't deny that she is definitely a media mogul. She is definitely an entrepreneur. She is a billionaire, not just because of her husband, but by herself. But she overcame a lot of obstacles, rejections, setbacks. There are people who thought that she would never make it when she was a teenager, and in that the girl group Destiny's Child would never make it, but she persevered, and there she is right now at the top of her success, and really with enough money that it would probably never run out. And so I'm talking to that girl. You have a talent, you have a gifting. You're not oblivious that God has called you for something. And I don't want to advocate that you go to try to use that talent to make money or for the world, but I do hope that if you have it, you use it. Because God invested it in you, and therefore you should invest it as well. It doesn't matter if people say you're not good enough, or if competitions say you're not good enough, or whatever in the world says that you'll never amount to anything. If you just keep on trying, keep on believing. I'm sure sometimes Beyonce might look back and think to herself, never in a million years, and I know that one day that some of you that are watching me, that's what you'll look back and think as well. And the last one, my favorite is Mary Magdalene. You know her. She's in the Bible. Of all the stories of all the women, Eve and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Rebecca and Rachel, and all of them, her story is so inspiring to me because little by little, the Bible just gives us snippets and pieces of this young lady. And, there's stories that have been built around her character. And some people say, well, she was the one who was possessed by 7 devils. And she was the one who broke the ointment on the Lord's feet and cried and dried them with her hair and all of those things. But one thing I know for sure is that she was nobody. There was nothing worth telling in her story because whatever she was, by the eyes of the world, she was not enough. We don't know if she ever had a love interest, if anybody ever looked at her and thought she was beautiful. We don't know if she ever had the family, the house, or the white picket fence, most likely not. But we do know that she loved the Lord, and she loved him so much that she, which blows my mind, was the first person to ever see the resurrected Christ. Wow. That little nobody girl was the first person that got to touch him after he came out of the tomb, that got to see him alive post crucifixion. Isn't that amazing to you? And here we are, so many hundreds, centuries, 20 centuries later, and we still know her name. And we still know her as the first one that Jesus looks at her and calls her by name. After his resurrection, he calls her Mary. And he sends her with the most profound message. He says, go find my boys, find my disciples, and tell them that you've seen me and that I am alive. And off went Mary to preach the first ever sermon of a resurrection, that he's alive. You know why I love her so much? I love her so much because Jesus put her in there with the message to go and tell. So that when anybody tries to convince me that I don't have the right to go and tell the world, even the men of the world, that Jesus is alive, I remember that she was the first to do it and set an example. And I will keep on preaching and preaching and preaching because she did it first. I'll tell you one more, just because I like telling stories, and maybe this one is one you've never heard about. So there was this little girl, and she was of another faith. And she was of Eastern religion faith, and she lived in a small little island way down in the Caribbean. And one day she was going off into the fields to tie the goats because that's what she did, and bumped into a book that was thrown into the field by someone passing by. It was a small little Gideon's New Testament Bible. And she bumped into it and she sat down in the grass and she opened the book and she started reading words. With all she had was a 3rd grade education, but she could still understand most of it. And then she closed the book and she left it there because something told her she could not take that book back to her own house. So she went and finished tying the goats. That night when she went home, all she could think about was the words that she had read in that book. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The words were small, so she knew them, but she didn't quite understand what it was trying to say to her. And all she could think about all night long was going back to the field and reading some more. So the next day, when she went to tie the goats, she found the book where she had left it, and she opened it and she read again. And as the goats grazed that day, she read and read. And the next day, she came back and she read some more. And she read until she had read the whole thing, especially in the book of John. And as she was reading in the book of John, she got to the 3rd chapter in the 16th verse, which said that God so loved the world that he gave his son. And something in the little girl's heart changed so much just by reading the words that was in that book that was thrown away, that she started to feel her heart soften for this person that was called God. And she picked up the book and she took it to her house. A few days later, it had been actually a few weeks, since she had found the book, in a few days after she took it to her house, that her brother discovered the book. And when he asked her what it was, she said she had never had one before. She had kind of heard about this God, but she thought that she was believing. And that day, somebody put a gun to her head and said that if you want to follow the God of that Bible, then you can't live in this house because we do not believe that stuff that was in that Bible. And whatever that little girl had read in that Bible was so strong and so convicting and so alive and so true to her that that day at 18 years old, she chose to take her one dress and her one pair of slippers and to leave that house. And she walked away for what she had read in a book. That young 18-year-old girl was my godmother. That 18-year-old was Samde Jury, the woman who not only helped raise me and teach me, the woman who was responsible for making my dad a minister of the gospel, and sure enough, for raising me and putting the gospel in my spirit. So today I preach the gospel. She's indirectly responsible for Preacher Girl because she was the first preacher girl I ever knew and the one who showed me that girls could preach the gospel. Sam Jury is the reason why in 2024 that we're starting the Sam Jury School of Ministry that will certify men and women to preach, to teach, to understand, to go on missions, to evangelize, to be prophets, and to teach them the true word of God and ministry. She was my godmother, my late and great godmother, and probably the most influential and inspiring woman I had ever known. Preacher girls, I hope this meant something to you. I hope if nothing else, it encouraged you to be strong, to be faithful, to be persistent, and to believe that if God called you, no one can uncall you because you don't need a pulpit. You just need a message. Please like this video if it did something for you. Subscribe to this channel and share it with somebody else because we want as many people to get the message as possible. Love you. Bye.